Okay, today what we're going to do is we're going to hang a door, and I've cut a hole in an existing wall, well, obviously an existing wall, in the plaster and lath, and removed everything. And I'm trying to make it plumb. Well, I'm not trying, I did make it plumb. And it's about 2.5 inches out from the top to the bottom. And I'm trying to get a 24-inch prefab door into this hole, which is also adjoining another door. This is an access into the basement, and I really need to be able to make it work in a tight environment. So I'm doing as much as I can. Right now I'm getting a template off of a threshold that's existing on the perpendicular to the doorway I'm putting in, or the door I'm putting in. All I'm doing here is taking a piece of cardboard and drawing the profile onto it, and then I'll be able to take this over to the saw and actually mimic this cut. So all you do is take the utility knife, cut away the cardboard, and you've got the exact angle. You could also use a bevel square, but the nice thing about this is that it's exact. You're getting this right off of something that's already existing. And you don't have to worry about trying to make sure that you've got the right angle, or what is the bottom, what is the top. It just works a lot easier this way. Whenever possible, try to work off of something exactly. Again, I'm not a big fan of tape measures and rulers, so anytime I get a chance to avoid them, I do so. So I put this on the table saw as if it were going to be cut that way, and I adjust the saw blade to it. And you can see a little bit of a gap there in the bottom. This isn't critical. We're just trying to get it really close. Once we cut it, we'll be able to sand it and make it perfect. Now I ran it through the wrong way the first time, so which is fine. It just means I had to recut it again. And by doing it this way, you actually get you want the flat of the threshold up against the fence, not on the table, and that's why I had to cut it again. But these things happen, and it's just par for the course. This is shop building on site, so it's a much different scenario than prefabbing stuff in a real quality controlled environment. We're doing things kind of on the fly here. Once it's cut, we give it a little sand, and actually the profile works out perfectly, and it will match exactly with the threshold that's perpendicular to it. Right now I need to rough cut out some of the pieces so that I can put the jambs on top of it on each side. Always make an X where I'm going to be cutting it, and then just some pencil marks to show exactly where it's going. See that X there? That's actually where the jam is going to be. The bottom of the jam is going to be. So as you can see, I can pretty much cut out a nice chunk of this threshold and not worry about it ever being exposed. Once it's cut out, I'll be able to adjust it a little bit as well. Here, all I'm doing is I'm going to be actually cutting cutting that corner out so that it'll actually match up with the other threshold. This is kind of a fun thing to do. It was an added, kind of an added, I don't know, bonus as far as making it look a little more interesting. I will actually sand and stain this later. And there are 1,000 different ways of doing things, but what I wanted to do here is I wanted to be able to back cut it at the same time as giving it that 45-degree cut there. And I'm using obviously the cross-cutting teeth on this pull saw. And what I'll be doing, and as you can see, what I'm doing is I'm not only cutting it, but I'm going to back cut it just a little bit. I could use the miter saw for doing this, but it's a bit of an extension on it, and by the time you set everything up, it actually ends up that sometimes cutting things like this by hand is a little quicker. And you don't have to worry about resetting things up. So, and it's also fun. There's nothing like the smell of sawdust in the morning. So this is a fun way of doing it. Wow, actually looks like a little bit of an optical illusion there. Back cutting it also gives it the point of doing that is so that when I go to push it up against the other side, you won't see anything underneath it. It'll give us a really nice tight fit. So that's part of one of the big reasons of doing that. And here right now what I'm doing is I'm taking my multi-master, and it's got a wonderful oscillating blade on it, just very quick way of getting into a tight space. And what I'm doing is I'm cutting the 45 in that old threshold so that when the two meet up, you'll be able to have a nice seamless look to it. And as you can see, it kind of smokes up a little bit there too, and it is lousy. Always lousy with noise, I should say. Always use hearing protection. All right, so I'm putting the two together, and they'll fit really nicely. I'm going to have to do some adjustments underneath it. I just want to make sure it lines up. What I ended up doing is I ended up having to, and I knew I was going to end up doing this anyway, is cutting out the bottom of it like this, because it's 3/8 of an inch out on one side, on that side right there, and down to 0. So I ran it through the table saw and cut it out. You're always going to have to fudge stuff a little bit to make it work, and that's one of the joys of working with an old house, is that you have plenty of opportunity to experiment and try to get it as close as you can to working. It is tough because it's not always going to work. But once again, once you get your planes right, and you get everything on the same playing field, then you're actually going to be able to make things work. This is just construction adhesive, and all I'm doing is putting that down so we will never squeak. There's nothing worse than a squeak. Since I'm going to be staining this, I'm just going to be using some finish nails from a gun to put it in. So I really want to make sure that it isn't going to make any noise whatsoever. And here's I'm using, I think, 2-inch wire nails in the 16 gauge wire nails. And once again, always wear your eye protection and hearing protection and any other kind of protection you can possibly arrange. One of the other aspects of putting this threshold in first was that it allows me to be able to put the jambs on top of it, and it's a lot easier to do it this way so that you're not cutting out the threshold. Here are some tools of the trade. I always like to line everything up like it's a surgical palette, including hearing protection, glasses, you name it. Right now what I'm doing is cutting out the hinges, and we're doing the 7-11, which is always the key. 7 inches from the top and 11 inches from the bottom. Now, although this looks absolutely ridiculously hazardous, what I'm doing is I'm rotating that off the finger and pressed up against the door. So it's not nearly as dangerous as it looks. Whenever you're using a utility knife, I'm always thinking about follow through, but I always try to put the weight on something else in the hand. And I do the same thing with the chisel, which this chisel is duller than this presentation. But again, my finger is beneath the chisel and on top of it, so I'm keeping it from flying out of control. And that's very important because you really, you just don't want it to slide off and hit you, or even worse, ruin the door, because that's a prefab door, and that's I think that's the material that's used as a veneer is a cardboard-based veneer, so you want to be really careful about putting that in. So once we set it up, we test it a couple of times to make sure that the hinge is going to fit, and once it does, we're like, okay. So the next step is to take the hinge, put it in, and with a pencil, obviously, as you can see, this is kind of self-explanatory, but what you're doing is you're drawing where the screw holes are going to go. And a good way of doing this is I do a 2-bit method in this. You could also, there's many other ways of doing this, but you could use a center punch and hammer it. And I don't know why I didn't do it for this. I think that I just prefer using a drill, basically. So I'll use that's I think a 16th inch bit, and that gets me really right in the center of each hole. Now the nice thing about this, when you're drilling, you're always doing, you have 3 holes, and one of them, because of the grain of the wood, is one or two of the holes may even be off a little bit when you drill it. That's the nature of the beast. So I use a small bit first, which helps get it right in the center of the hole. I'll beef it up to a slightly larger bit, and I'm only going down about maybe 3/16 of an inch into the wood itself, if that. And that's just to get the screw started. I want to make as much biting material as possible, but I don't want to split the wood. And you don't really need to go that deep in order to set the screw. So you blow out the sawdust, set the screw, set the hinge in place. And as you can see, I set my drill on low because you do not want to strip it out. There's nothing worse because those are brass screws, and so you have to be kind of careful when you're putting them in. A lot of guys will, just start them and then hand finish them. I do have a clutch on this drill, so it can be set so that when it does get snug enough, the clutch will engage and you won't strip the screw. Or you can just be careful. I think that's what I was just doing here. I was just trying to be careful. And then voila, you have the hinges are set, and the nice thing about this is that once they're good to go, you can actually pop the pins. And that's what I've done here is I popped the pins, took off the second leaf of the hinge, put the door in place temporarily with shims, and shimmed it to exactly the height I want it, to the distance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the nice thing about this is that I can mark exactly where I want the hinges to go. Again, staying away from measuring things. Whenever you measure things, there's always an opportunity to be off just a little bit, even if it's only, you know, a 1/16 of an inch here and a 1/16 of an inch there. It all adds up, and you end up with, you know, you can end up with something that's off. Well, you do the math. And of course, you know, I do end up using a tape measure for some things, and right now all I'm doing is I'm measuring the depth. I want the door flush with the trim, the jamb, so I'm transferring that depth of the door, which is 1 inch and 3/8, to the jamb. This will actually locate my hinge. So once the hinge is located, minus the veneer of the door, I mark it, and I use my square to mark it with a pencil. And I already have the top and bottom where I use the utility knife to mark it, and that gives me a really nice exact measurement. And here is just tracing it out so I can see it, you know, because I can see everything, and marking it so that I know exactly where it is. Pardon the other hinge on the other door. There was no choice as far as placing it here. It had to go here, and that's not my preference. I think I would have liked to have hung the door a different way, but for a variety of reasons, I ended up having to do it this way. Right now I'm just taking the utility knife and just lightly scoring where it's going to go, and this light scoring helps keep it in place. And I will do this all the way around the hinge where it's going, very lightly, being very careful not to press too deeply. I just want to score the wood so that when I take the square away, I can actually press a little bit harder and keep working the blade a few times through the wood, so that I get, when it comes time to chiseling out the waste, I'll have a nice deep trough to go through. And right now I'm just, once again, you don't have to do it this way, but I like to take the square and use it to even further, you know, give myself some nice chipping material. So when I take the chisel right here, this stuff will actually pop out. Again, if I had a sharp chisel, this would be a very fast job and probably a lot safer. Unfortunately, you know, I had to work with what I had, and it was a bit of a time crunch, so I didn't have time to sharpen my chisels, which is, you know, definitely not smart. But hey, if I were smarter, I'd probably be doing rocket science or surgery or something. Anywho, this stuff pops out, and it's kind of rewarding. It's kind of fun to do, and I do enjoy this part of the job very much because there's some sense of satisfaction. You could also use a router. And you know, route away most of the waste that way, but I prefer using a chisel. And as you can see, nothing touching it, it's not screwed in, but just by pressure alone, it's got a perfectly flush cut, and it's sitting quite nicely in the jamb. Right now I'm just taking this square and I'm finding on the jamb, I'm making my marks as far as exactly where I want the plate to go. And once I make the marks on that, I have the height, the top and bottom of where the plate's going to go, and now I'm just making a pencil mark where the back of the, what's the technical word for that? Oh, I don't know, the latch, I guess. Making a mark where the back of the latch is going to go. Then I take the plate itself, put it up, make my marks, basically trace around it. And once again, trying to keep it as tight as possible. There's the depth of where the big hole is going to go. So after I score everything, I'll know exactly where I want to go. Again, I'm using, I think it was an 11/16 bit, and that gives me my marks for where the cutout is. I cut out, basically treating it the same way as you would the hinges. You can see some stop blocks on the side that go all the way around the door. There's the finished strike plate and a hole. And later on, we'll actually finish it with you know, the trim. But right now, this is how you hang a door. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. We'll see you next week, or whenever, I think. Baha.